What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Fire Force, and this one is more world building, but things are really kicking off here, so let's get started. So right at the start of this episode, we actually get a lot of information, mostly told through visuals, about Iris and her past, and we see sort of her reminiscing over the things that happened, or at least remembering some of the things that happened, including her interactions with Hibana back when she was actually at the church that she was studying, or I guess a part of, for becoming a sister in the Fire Force. Though we do see during an interaction, small interaction during a little photo shoot, that it seems like Hibana, at least in some way, sort of cared about Iris, or at least wanted her to be a little happier. I'm not 100% sure. It was weird, because essentially the act was basically Hibana putting her hand on Iris's shoulder. Iris looks up, there's a smile, and then they take the picture, and there's fire, which the camera nerd in me also loves the fact that somebody went to the trouble of modeling or drawing a Fujifilm X800 or X100 camera with the little timer, spring-loaded timer for the shutter button. That's the camera nerd in me, but we'll move on from that. Anyway, well, she's here, which, by the way, she was basically just wearing a white robe and pouring water on herself. While she's doing that, we have Shinra doing his morning run and comes across her, and of course it's an awkward sort of, not fan servicey, just sort of an awkward moment between the two, and we see that he notices that Iris was crying, and or at least had tears in her eyes, which means that of course those memories are sort of, seems like a very mixed emotion kind of memory for her, because she's got older memories that are seemingly positive with Hibana, but also some fairly negative emotions, because clearly most of the people who were in that convent or in the church that she was at died in a fire. So I can imagine those are some mixed emotions. But after that first sort of awkward encounter between her and Shinra, she comes out wrapped in a towel, and Shinra asks if everything was okay, and she said everything's fine, but she was putting on a very sort of noticeably strained smile, or at least a forced smile, which means that last episode, when I pointed out this moment here, this very subtle moment right there, that I was right. I was correct. She was sort of putting on a smile to make it seem as though she was more positive than she actually is, which I love when I notice little details like that, but yeah, it was absolutely putting on a face, putting on a strained smile, and that was sort of funny to me that it was right, and it was a blind guess. So anyway, opening kicks in, it's badass as always. I expect nothing less out of this show, and we have a meeting between Obi and the rest of the Fire Force, and Obi's doing this ridiculous balancing act, weightlifting thing, and he's showing off how strong he is again. I don't know if this is just because he trains on a daily basis and this is just something he's doing, or if he's stepping up his training regimen because of the comments that were made by one of the fire soldiers of Company 5. I like to think that he just trains this hard because he can, but on the same hand, it could actually be that he's trying to become even stronger because of the comments made by Fire Company 5. Guessing, I don't think they are really going to go into it. They didn't really play it up, they just showed him doing it. I would like to point out, with the amount of weight that he was carrying and how much he probably weighs with how big he is, that balance ball or that yoga ball probably would have popped. Just throwing that out there. Either way, the meeting's going on, and Shinra is not paying attention to anything that they're saying because he's more focused on what Hinawa's hat says, and of course then we have freaking Arthur going after birds like they're griffins because he's kind of not all there, it seems. And then we have everybody just sort of having their own little conversation, and then Hinawa steps in and tells everybody to listen. And he tells them to stop in the only way it seems he knows how, which is to point a gun at them. And, well, I thought the gun was fake, and apparently so did Shinra. The gun is not fake, it is very real. Shinra thought that Hinawa was joking. Hinawa was not joking. He shoots Shinra in the leg, and we finally discover, or at least get a full explanation of what Hinawa's ability actually is. So Hinawa's pyrokinetic ability is actually to control the amount of force put out by the gunpowder in a bullet. and he can make it stronger, make it weaker. He can even direct the bullets using sparks, which is pretty awesome, which we see later in the episode. But it was actually really cool to finally get an explanation of why he's got a gun in the opening and his eyes are glowing, why he carries a gun with him all the time, all that stuff. And it was funny to me because I saw his eyes glowing in the opening, and it seems like the only people whose eyes glow are people with pyrokinetic abilities, and I didn't think he had any because of the fact that he was simply just shooting a gun. Now we discover that it is actually a genuine pyrokinetic ability that lets him control his fire, well, rather control the bullets that he fires, which is on its own pretty cool and pretty terrifying. Now, of course, after this brief exchange, the whole point of the meeting was to make them aware of the fact that they'll be going up against fire soldiers, and fire soldiers are significantly more cunning, more well-trained, and in a lot of cases stronger than the Infernals that they normally have to go up against. So this is where the training begins with Obi and Shinra, and basically everybody has to start training. And of course, Obi is training by lifting a ton of weights. Arthur is training against Maki, and Maki is kind of telling him how to properly fight hand-to-hand by not focusing on hands and paying attention to the whole body, which makes sense. But in this as well, we learn a lot about what Company 5's been doing. We learn that Hibana went from a nobody to a fire captain in an extremely short, almost unreasonably short amount of time. And the only way that she could have done that is through some sort of back alley shady means. And the plan is that they are going to get into Fire Company 5, into their headquarters, and figure out what they know, even if it takes force, which again ties back to why they're training so hard. And of course, immediately after this, we see that Fire Company 5 does not exactly have the best practices when it comes to trying to figure out how Infernals work. In fact, with even this very interesting Infernal that is still mostly conscious and able to speak, he is being torn apart by Hibana herself. And we get this moment which definitely kind of reminds me of Soul Eater. Like, the art style definitely reminds me a lot of Soul Eater. The over-exaggerated look of the character during this more crazy moment definitely reminds me a lot of that. And I like that because it's been such a long time since I've watched a show like Soul Eater, and so being able to kind of get a different show with sort of a familiar art style, and honestly a very interesting world that is very similar but also in the same hand nothing like Soul Eater. It's kind of hard to explain, but there's a lot of stuff that I love it, and I think I maybe have a soft spot because Soul Eater was the first big getting me back into anime show that I watched. But anyway, later in the episode, of course, Shinra is still thinking about Iris and kind of worried about her and why she was upset or why she was crying earlier in the episode. And he's trying to ask Arthur about this, but of course Arthur's imagination and stupidity never turns off. And at this point, Maki shows up and asks if they had seen Iris, and that's when things get real. So Iris went to Fire Company 5 to meet with Hibana, and this is really not a good thing at all. In fact, in this instance, Hibana is able to use Iris as a pawn to lure in the rest of Company 5, and her plans are basically to wipe them off the map. We also see that despite the somewhat friendly interaction that the two had when they were both at that convent, that is clearly gone now. At least it is sort of more one-sided, because last episode, of course, we had the prolonged sort of glare that we got from Hibana looking at Iris. Now this time we see it all come to the surface. We see Hibana full-on burn away the habit that Iris was wearing. It's fan service, but the thing is it's actually plot-oriented and plot-progressing fan service that actually stands to point something out, which is that this character, Hibana, loathes everything that the sisters stand for, and therefore does not want to see something resembling that in her presence. So yes, it's fan service, but in this instance, I get it, and I'm actually not upset by it, because it's not gratuitous and unnecessary. And of course we also now see Hibana's beliefs, which is the fact that there is no great soul, there is no god of this world. She is very scientifically oriented and refuses to believe in any sort of greater power other than herself, and the fact that she is able to discover, which we have the reveal, she was able to discover the cause of these infernals. Now, we don't know what it is. Apparently she knows what it is, but the question is what is it? And I feel like if they reveal it too soon, it's going to completely kind of take away any sort of suspense. But on the same hand, if they reveal it well enough, then we may actually have like a cause to continue and give these characters a reason to fight on for something else. Granted, once Hibana's done having this sort of crazy meltdown thing, she actually throws a jacket onto Iris, which shows that maybe she has some level of care. I really don't know anymore. It seems one-sided, but then that one little act was sort of like, I'm still not, completely evil, even though I just called myself a devil. Now she's planning to lure in Company 8 to annihilate them. And on that note, Shinra is the first to actually show up at Company 5's front door, basically, and he proceeds to start trying to get in while the others come in the matchbox. Arthur cuts a hole in the wall, the matchbox comes rolling in, and we see everybody sort of give their best demonstration of their abilities to some degree or another. Arthur's was kind of an exception. His was kind of for stupid reasons. We also have Maki sort of not wanting to fight. She even says she quit the military in order to fight Infernals, not do, hand-to-hand or, fighting people. She wanted to fight Infernals, but she's now kind of back into doing that because of the investigation going on. And we see, which I love, Hinoa's ability in full action, including this moment, which was kind of just funny. So, yeah, he clearly has no problem with doing that. We also see the guy who was being a total jerk the last episode, blowing these, bubblegum things. We know now that his ability is creating oxygen-free bubbles with his oxygen-free bubblegum. And when it pops, it combusts, and he can create big explosions with it. But Hinoa was able to take him out with essentially no problem once he figures out where he's at. He can direct and ricochet the bullets all over the place and just completely take him out, which is where we learn that not only is the gunpowder something that he can control, but the sparks caused by the ricochet of the bullets is also something that he can control. So he has a very high speed and very potentially dangerous and powerful fire ability that I think is probably going to be underrated and underutilized by the end of this episode, but could be completely overpowered if they really played with it a lot. Then we have Arthur's, which is kind of just stupid. He has to face off against this Infernal who is now under the control of Fire Company 5. He's got some sort of serum thing, or the scientist rather, who's in Company 5 has some sort of serum that now can control this Infernal or make him rather want to fight for them. Weird. But whatever, I guess it's something that can be done. And Arthur is just getting his ass kicked by this guy, and we don't know why. I mean, obviously we've seen Arthur take on worse. We've seen Arthur fight in a very competent way despite his idiocy. And then we see by the end of the fight that all he had to do was switch from left to right because he's right-handed. And by switching to his right hand, he took this dude out in no time flat. So did he just forget, I guess? I don't know what he did. It seems like he just forgot that he was right-handed, not left-handed, and once he switched, he was back to full strength. Whatever. It was still well animated, and I liked it. And by the very end of this episode, we have two sort of big things. So we have Maki and Hinoa, who have now taken out what we thought were originally 3 of the firefighter Charlie's Angels, and in reality there seemed to be many more, one of which was not taken out, but she was hiding because she was terrified of fighting them, and the rest were completely annihilated. And the other big thing is we have the setup now for potentially a fight between Hibana and Shinra, which I'm actually really excited to see because it ended with him landing in front of the mansion thing, which is funny because it seems like the more religious-based fire companies have a church front, or at least Company 8 does, but I'm not sure if Company 1 does, because they also seem to be very influenced by the church. But Company 5 doesn't. They have a very industrial sort of mansion and modern-looking environment as their fire company area, which I think is kind of neat because you can visually tell what each of these fire companies sort of stand for, or rather what their beliefs are, solely by the way that their actual fire halls are set up, which I think is really neat. Either way, I like the setup for the end of this episode because I'm really kind of looking forward to this big fight between both, hopefully, Hibana and Shinra. That should be a pretty interesting fight, but we also have no idea where Obi is. He has not shown up yet. I'm presuming that he's going to be showing up later, or he's going to be showing up and reprimanding these main characters from our fire company for breaking in and just going full ham on this one fire group, because they're supposed to investigate, and they're supposed to investigate very subtly. At least initially that was my impression, that it was supposed to be a subtle investigation, and that is exactly the opposite of what this is. So we might have something, we might not. I really don't know, but I am excited to see where it goes from here. Otherwise, this episode was actually pretty solid. More world building, actually less world building, more of just character building. We get some information about how different characters, especially Hinoa, uses his ability. We also learn more about how the Infernals can be controlled, or at least Fire Company 5 has figured out how to control the Infernals. And we know now that Fire Company 5 knows the secret to the Infernals. And this was something that I kind of was guessing it was either Iris or potentially Hibana or somebody from Fire Company 5. I'm kind of all over the place at this point with my guesses because I don't really know where we're going to be going next. But I hope that we get a really good payoff to this fight. I hope we get more information. So far, this series is rock solid. I've got no complaints. I love it. And I hope you guys do as well. I also hope you guys like these videos. Please make sure to like and subscribe if you do like them. Leave a comment letting me know if you guys think I missed anything, if there was something I could have covered. And also thank you guys for letting me know in the last episode that the reason why they blurred the faces of the kids that were on fire in the church was because of the awful anime studio fire in Japan. My heart and prayers go out to those people who were affected by that, but on the same hand, thank you guys for letting me know. It makes a lot more sense now. Either way, guys, thanks for watching. Like I said, make sure to like and subscribe and comment. Check out the links in the description where you can watch this legally. Please, it's a big deal. You guys got to watch this legally. Otherwise, they are in just an awful state where they're not going to be able to afford the next series to do. So don't pirate, get the real thing. And otherwise, I'll see you guys in the next video. Make sure to be there and have a good one.